You hear about the secret or manifesting or intention. All of that is it's capturing a fundamental principle of the way that our neurology works, which is.
So does that mean that if you believe when you are at the outset of a task that you're doing something important, so you're approaching a valued goal, and you have a lot of anticipation as a consequence of that, does that mean that you put yourself in a neurochemical state that facilitates learning?
Absolutely, without question.
So if you believe what you're doing is important, if you truly believe that because it's related to an important goal and it's a pathway forward, then that's going to transform into a manifestation of neuroplasticity.
Absolutely.
Imagine that you have someone who's habitually avoidant, and maybe they're avoidant because when they become possessed by negative emotion, they become hyper aware of their internal state and they feel the panic, and so then they freeze or retreat, and they do that constantly, and then they're in this terrible negative emotional state all the time because every time they see a stimulus that's associated with retreat, they get gripped by these interoceptive sensations. And so you say to them, well, we're going to reverse that. Instead of you being gripped by that, by fiat, by the command of these underlying systems, you're going to expose yourself to that voluntarily. Now, you could imagine that what you're doing is imposing the dominance of that nucleus reunions on the anxiety-provoking systems. Is it the case that if you put someone in chronically and voluntarily into a state where, let's say, the nucleus reunions is activated, that transforms their character at the genetic level so that that's more likely to be the case in the future? So it really retools them all the way down to the DNA.
Yeah, incredibly important question. There are two modes of changing these responses in the neural circuitry. One lies in so-called neuroplasticity, which is could be strengthening of synapses or just reordering of nerve connections. Could be the addition of new cells. There's a lot of excitement about the addition of new neurons, but really that only reflects a small percentage of changes in the brain of adults. It's actually more of the rewiring of existing connections, but the mechanism doesn't matter so much. Something gets rewired such that the response is then different going forward. It's many fewer trials or many fewer cognitive behavioral therapy sessions. This has only been done a few times, or many fewer learning sessions to create a permanent shift in the neurology. And every time I hear about the sort of, woo statements about, I don't want to offend anyone here, but sure, I'll just say, you hear about the secret or manifesting or intention. All of that is it's capturing a fundamental principle of the way that our neurology works, which is that the prefrontal cortex, as a rule-setting but flexible rule-setting machine that taps into the dopamine system, can absolutely adopt new rules for reward release in the brain. Again, there's basically only one reward system. There's also serotonin system, as you know, but the dopamine system is the major currency of reward. So much so that, for instance, everyone knows that food is rewarding. We anticipate food, we eat a delicious steak or something, and we feel rewarded. However, if you are somebody who can attach thoughts such as, fasting is good for me, I'm going to do intermittent fasting, or I'm not going to eat those foods, and therefore I'm going to attach my thinking to the rewards that will come with better health, better aesthetics, etc. The dopamine system responds. It's not just a belief in a narrative, it's a real response. And what actually starts to happen is that people start to enjoy the foods that they are restricting themselves to more. Laboratory at Stanford, that if you believe a food is nutritious and good for you, it actually has better impact on your physiology. Of course, there are the rules of physiology and nutrition that still apply, right? You can't tell yourself that the garbage is good for you, right? But there's a significant scaling up of the positive response that's associated with dopamine and hormonal cascades, which we can talk about in a moment. In the same way, if one adopts a sort of a Carol Dweckian growth mindset approach, okay, it's not about receiving the reward, that the more strain I feel, the more effort that I'm putting in, the closer I'm getting to my goal, that over time will become a rewarding state such that one will pursue states of reaching.
Yeah, well, it should be also proportional to the magnitude of the goal.
That's right.
Right. And so this is, I think, why people are so obsessed in some sense with the search for fundamental meaning. It's because you want to be able to associate. So imagine, this is a good story. So you can imagine two people laying bricks. They're building a gigantic wall. And the one person thinks, oh my God, this wall is going to take 100,000 bricks and I'm laying one at a time and I'm wasting my life away, trivially adding to this gigantic brick wall, and what am I doing? This is absolutely miserable, brick by brick. And the other person thinks, in 300 years, this is going to be a cathedral. And so the person in the second state is doing exactly the same thing at a local level, laying bricks, but each brick is related to a very high goal. And that means the reward that's attendant upon the laying of the brick is proportional to the goal, to the to the aim of the entire behavioral process. And so it seems to me, so if you're aimless and goalless, and I know you've done some work on goal setting, if you're aimless and goalless, then you can't elicit any positive emotion.